A lot of talk in the last week about history being thrown away, and we'll actually get into that now. And then this is happening, like, and what I'm talking about here is, I'm sure you've all heard, if you're a big MotoGP fan, there's been a bit of a change of direction in the way that we're talking about past winners in Grand Prix motorcycle racing, if you want to call it that, rather than MotoGP, Grand Prix motorcycle racing, which is a sport that's covered several classes over the 70-year history, all the way from 125ccs. Did they ever go lower than that? Maybe at some point. 125cc racing, all the way through to the modern MotoGP 4-stroke 1000cc bikes. And we've had 350s, 500s, whatever. The Premier class has always been held as a higher echelon, obviously, with the old 500s and now the MotoGP class. But we've always considered anyone who's won on one of the junior classes to be a Grand Prix world champion, motorcycle Grand Prix world champion, and all their wins are marked down as Grand Prix wins. Now, an interesting change now, and what's happened is they're now no longer considered Grand Prix wins. I don't know if that's being retrospectively changed as well, so that anyone who's won anyone's old 250 wins, for example, maybe Rossi's 250 wins, if we use an example of Rossi, aren't counted as Grand Prix wins anymore. They're just 250cc race wins. Because if you look at and I'll put it on the screen now, race schedules for Sundays, they no longer say Grand Prix as the race definition kind of thing here. So obviously next to MotoGP, 27 laps for the next round in Indonesia, Grand Prix. The Moto2 is just not a Moto2 Grand Prix, it's a Moto2 race. Okay. Now and there's so many videos on this that people talk about it, very good. And, I watched the Beehive Paddock one. It's a great channel. It's actually a cracking channel. I love that. This was my favourite MotoGP channel. And I heard Valentin Karuzny and Simon Patterson from the race do a video on it. And that was a good one because they kind of had two perspectives on it, because Valentin is a little bit more like, well, we've always considered MotoGP wins worth more anyway. But I think that the key thing here is MotoGP or motorcycle racing, Grand Prix racing, has always had a unique aspect to it that things like Formula One never had. And that's that you could have household names racing earlier in the day in junior categories and smaller bikes. And these were Grand Prix winners, Grand Prix world champions and Grand Prix riders. And it's always been one paddock. There's always been, with something like Formula One, for example, a disconnect between, in fact, to the point where Formula 2 wasn't always called Formula 2. It was like GP2, wasn't it? And it wasn't really that relevant. And you didn't really hear about guys until they got to Formula 1, for the layman anyway, or people who aren't involved in it. Whereas with MotoGP, I mean, obviously with stuff like that, you always knew about like guys like Hamilton if they were coming through, but that's really it. Anyone else that wasn't like the next big thing, you didn't really hear about it. But now Formula One is actually trying to, I think, make Formula 2 and Formula 3 a bit more like Moto 2 and Moto 3. And what MotoGP is doing, trying to get away from that, make MotoGP a little bit more Formula One-y, where unless you won a Formula One world title, the rest doesn't really matter. And so I think MotoGP always had something unique in that you never even had to leave the intermediate class to be a household name and a Grand Prix world champion and a career Grand Prix rider. You could just stay there your whole career. And while I would never have probably, considered that as big and as an achievement as maybe a single MotoGP world title, maybe winning like Max Biaggi, 250 world titles, wasn't it? I'd rather have Joan Mir's one MotoGP world title. But it can always still turn around and be like, I'm a 4-time world champion, Grand Prix world champion in the Grand Prix paddock. So, I mean, I'd ask what you guys think of it, but it just seems to me at the moment that it's pretty universally not loved, this idea. It's relevant this weekend because they asked Mark not to promote the fact he's a 9-time world champion now. We're expecting to see the number 9 pop up a lot, like it has done with Rossi, and then like both of them, when they won world championships, were always counting them as based on the 2 junior world championships they both won. For me, the interesting thing is, like, it's fine if maybe you don't want to call it that. We'll still all consider it that it's a world championship. But even if you don't want to call it a Grand Prix world championship, why tell guys to not acknowledge it? Like, why aren't we acknowledging it anymore? We always did. And it was a unique aspect to it. And maybe it's something that for people new to the sport, you'd have to explain it to them. They'd be like, oh, right, I'm not really a big fan of that. Whatever. It's just the way we do it. I mean, I don't love it. To be fair. And it might have to be one of those things like, it's like Disney Star Wars, isn't it? I'm going to go off on another tangent here. It's like Disney Star Wars. Like, I watch up to number 6 and everything else, which is officially canon, right? I just pretended that this isn't real. I pretend it's like fan fiction or something. Just pretend it's not real. Now, in saying that, again, like I said, I always valued MotoGP World Championships above, or Premier Class World Championships above any amount almost of lower class championships. I don't know, it's hard to explain what it is about it that's quite frustrating. Because when you look at it, if they say, well, you only count them as better than them anyway. It was like, yeah, but they still are Grand Prix World Champions. It's still a Grand Prix. That race, that Moto2 race that happens before the MotoGP race, it's still a Grand Prix to me. You're still a Grand Prix winner. For me, this feels more like it's now classified more like the sprint wins. A sprint doesn't count as a Grand Prix win. Now, neither does a Moto2 win. And I'd be interested to know now, like I asked before, are they going to retrospectively go back now and eliminate all Grand Prix wins that are counted? You know, is Angel Nieto on 0 Grand Prix wins? That's what I want to know. Is he on 0 Grand Prix wins? Travesty if that's what they're going to... In the official history books, they're going to call it 0 Grand Prix wins. Now, I say that without knowing if Angel Nieto actually ever did win a Premier Class title. Did he ever compete in the Premier Class? But I know he won like 15 more titles or something in the junior categories. Like ridiculous numbers. Let's look him up. It's not someone I've actually looked too much into over the years, to be honest, but he's obviously, you know the name and you know he's a legend. 50cc. Yeah, so 50cc, we did used to go all the way down to that. I had a feeling we did. I was in the 60s. 125, 250, just career, because it just suited the smaller bikes. So we just went after the smaller bikes. It was fine. Nothing wrong with that. And I know that naturally as the sport's progressed, we've lost that anyway. So it's like that doesn't really exist anymore. And they did, the year they put the age cap on Moto3, or was it 125s at the time? The year they put that age cap on it, it kind of tried to kill that off already, that you could just spend your whole career racing 125s. I think of guys like Lucio Cecchinello, always just was in and around 250s and that, and just until he retired and then he became a team owner. Like, I'm just wondering what... I feel like sometimes with this kind of stuff, similar with changing the way that the Champions Tower looks, like there's a small change, but it's a change. I feel like, and this is a thing not just with sports like this, but also big companies and stuff. Sometimes I feel like they need to make changes for the sake of making changes. Like if you sat around a boardroom and put this forward and just discuss the benefits and negatives of this, I don't know what you'd really come up with as like one of the main benefits. And if you do come up with a couple of little things like, oh, maybe it makes it easier for people to sort of understand who the Premier Class World Champions are without having to be like, well, actually, I know he's won the most world titles, but he's not actually the best of all time because he only did it in 125s and 50cc and 250s. But he's actually won a MotoGP world title, so technically he's actually higher up there. And I know it's like maybe that's your main argument. But even when you sat down and discussed all that together, you'd be like, yeah, but so what? Would you not still just at the end of that be like, yeah, but fine. Doesn't mean we have to change it. And then you'd go, well, I guess it doesn't, does it? I mean, it's not that big of an issue. It's like when companies do these rebrands and stuff and you're like, yeah, but why'd you do that? You're like, wow, it's more modern. Yeah, but so what? Like, who cares? You've taken something very recognizable and unique and you've made it not. So I feel like it's a change for the sake of change is what I'm saying. And it didn't need to happen. It doesn't need to happen.